The brunch had started like every other. Polished silverware, polite laughter, and the faint sound of jazz floating through the restaurant. I was mid-sip of orange juice when Grandpa Walter smiled at me, his eyes soft behind his glasses, and said, "I'm so glad you're enjoying the apartment I got you." The words hit like glass shattering. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The clink of forks died. My throat burned. I stared at him, unsure if I'd heard right. Mom's hand froze around her coffee cup. My sister Megan's phone lowered an inch. Dad, Richard, looked down at his plate like it suddenly demanded his full attention. My pulse pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. "What apartment?" I asked, half laughing because the alternative was too painful to consider. Grandpa's face flickered in confusion. "The one I bought you after graduation," he said. The table spun. I swallowed hard. "Grandpa, I don't live in any apartment. I've been renting a basement for 4 years." The air turned electric. My father's fork slipped, striking porcelain. Grandpa blinked, his smile fading, replaced by something older, heavier. "That can't be," he whispered. I looked around the table, the same faces I'd grown up with, and for the first time, they all looked like strangers. The silence after my words felt alive, thick, pulsing, impossible to breathe through. I watched Grandpa's eyes cloud over, his hand trembling slightly as he set his mimosa down. "You've been living in a basement?" The rain was relentless that morning, pounding against the sidewalk like it wanted to bury me in its rhythm. I pulled my soaked jacket tighter around me and hurried toward the office building, pretending not to notice the receptionist's pitying look as I left wet footprints behind. It had become my morning routine, dodging puddles, arriving drenched, forcing a smile. Every time someone joked, "You should really get a car, Rachel," something inside me twisted. I wanted to scream that I should have one. My grandpa, Walter, had promised me a car after I graduated college. He'd always been my biggest supporter, the man who believed in me when no one else did. But no car ever came. When I asked my parents about it, they said, "You know how expensive things have been lately." I didn't push. I was taught not to. That day, as I wrung out my sleeves in the office bathroom, I stared at my reflection, tired, small, and invisible. I worked hard, never complained, yet somehow always came last. My sister Emily, on the other hand, never had to ask for anything. New clothes, new phone, new car, she got it all. I told myself it didn't matter, but walking home through pouring rain every night told me otherwise. I didn't know it yet, but that same week, a single question from my grandpa would unravel years of deceit and favoritism. It would turn a quiet family dinner into a storm louder than any thunder outside. If you've ever been overlooked or made to feel like your pain doesn't matter, this true story, my family revenge story, is for you. Stay with me till the end. Subscribe if you believe justice, no matter how late, still matters. The dinner invitation came on a Wednesday, tucked neatly inside a voicemail from Grandpa Walter's warm, gravelly voice. "Rachel, sweetheart, I haven't seen you in too long. Come by this Saturday for dinner. Bring your parents and Emily. It's been ages since we've all sat together." I didn't think much of it then. Grandpa loved family gatherings, roast beef dinners, his old jazz records humming softly in the background, his stories about working 3 jobs to put food on the table. Those dinners were my favorite memories from childhood. They reminded me that love once existed before everything turned complicated. Saturday came, and I spent the morning cleaning my small apartment before heading over. My shoes squelched from a puddle outside, and I smiled bitterly. Another wet day. When I arrived, the house smelled of rosemary and lemon, the way it always did when Grandpa cooked. He greeted me with a tight hug. His hands were cold, but his heart was still the same. Steady, kind, full of quiet strength. The dining room glowed under a chandelier that had seen 3 generations. My parents sat upright, polite smiles plastered on their faces. Emily scrolled on her phone, barely acknowledging me. Grandpa's eyes softened when they met mine. "You've been walking to work again, haven't you? You always were the tough one." I laughed lightly, trying not to show the exhaustion behind it. Something like that. That night, Grandpa was unusually quiet between bites. He looked thoughtful, maybe even a little worried. "You know," he said at one point, "it's been a while since I asked about that car I bought for you after graduation." My fork froze midair. The air thickened, heavy with confusion. A chill ran through me as I saw my parents exchange the quickest, guiltiest glance. I didn't know it yet, but that question was about to shatter the fragile peace we'd been pretending to keep. The question hung in the air like a live wire. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, looking from me to my parents. "Rachel," he said slowly, "how's the car running? Still treating you well?" The fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. "What car?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence was instant, suffocating. Emily's phone screen dimmed as she froze, eyes flicking toward Mom. Dad's throat bobbed once, twice. Grandpa frowned. "The Toyota I bought for you, remember? Right after graduation. I gave your parents the paperwork. You didn't get it?" My pulse roared in my ears. Every sound, cutlery, footsteps from the kitchen, even the ticking clock, vanished under the weight of his words. "No, Grandpa," I managed to say. "I never got any car." Grandpa's face darkened. "Gregory?" he said, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Elaine? I gave you the money, the documents. What happened?" Dad's jaw tightened. "Dad, Rachel didn't need a car. She lives close to work. Emily was starting college. She needed transportation." Grandpa's hand slammed against the table, making the glasses jump. "You gave away something that wasn't yours to give." His voice boomed with fury I'd never heard before. Mom tried to smooth things over. "Please, Dad, don't make this bigger than it is. Rachel's independent. She manages fine. Emily, stop." Grandpa's tone cut like glass. He turned to me, eyes softening for a brief moment. "You've been walking to work every day while your sister drove the car I bought you?" I nodded, my throat tight. "For years." Emily's face drained of color. I didn't know," she muttered, but even she didn't sound convinced. That was the night I saw my family for what it really was. A house built on favoritism and quiet theft. That night, something in me began to break. I barely remember driving home that night, or rather, being driven. Grandpa insisted on taking me himself after the storm that erupted at the table. The car ride was quiet, except for the hum of the wipers and my own racing heartbeat. I stared out the window, watching streetlights smear across the glass like streaks of guilt. When we pulled up to my apartment, Grandpa's voice cracked the silence. "Rachel, I had no idea. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I trusted them." I managed a faint smile, though my eyes burned. "It's not your fault. You couldn't have known." But as I climbed the stairs and shut the door behind me, the weight of it all crushed me. Years of being overlooked, brushed aside, told I was strong enough to handle less. It all replayed in cruel detail. Every rainy morning I trudged to work while Emily sped past in the car that was meant for me. Every birthday, where she got gifts, I didn't. Every time my parents said, "You don't need that, Rachel, you're fine." I wasn't fine. I'd been surviving on scraps of affection while my sister feasted on privilege. And now I knew it wasn't by accident. It was a choice they made. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to cry. Not the quiet tears I used to hide, but deep, shaking sobs that left me gasping. The next morning, I called in sick. I couldn't face anyone. I sat on the floor surrounded by old photos, staring at the smiles that suddenly felt fake. I realized something painfully clear. I had built my whole life around the idea that if I worked hard enough, my family would finally see me. But that was never going to happen. I hit rock bottom that day. And sometimes that's exactly where you need to fall before you can rise. The days after that dinner blurred into one long ache. I went through the motions, worked, smiled, pretended, but inside I was hollow. I kept replaying Grandpa's shocked face, my father's excuses, and my mother's calm lies. Somewhere deep down, I decided that silence had protected them long enough. One Sunday morning, I found myself in the attic of my apartment, digging through a box of old documents I'd taken when I moved out years ago. My hands trembled as I flipped through yellowed receipts, school certificates, and finally, an envelope with Grandpa's handwriting. Inside was a carbon copy of the car title application. My name, my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The handwriting was close, but I knew my own strokes. Dad had forged my name. My breath caught. A cold fury replaced the pain. This wasn't just favoritism, it was theft. My own father had stolen from me and lied to his own father. I snapped a photo of the document and texted Grandpa. I found proof. He called instantly. "Come tomorrow," he said. "Bring everything." That night, for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I stayed up late writing everything down. Dates, messages, memories. Every small betrayal that had seemed harmless suddenly connected like threads in a web of deceit. By morning, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about respect, justice, and reclaiming what was mine. I dressed deliberately. Pressed shirt, hair tied back, no tears. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "They wanted me strong. Fine. I'll show them what strong really means." That day, the girl who walked into Grandpa's house wasn't the same girl who walked in the rain. Grandpa's house felt different when I pulled up that Monday morning. The curtains were drawn, the air still, like the calm before a storm that already knew its destination. Grandpa met me at the door, his eyes sharp, determined. "Come in, Rachel," he said quietly. "We'll handle this together." On the dining table sat a neat stack of papers, his reading glasses, and his old leather folder. The same one he used for every important deal he'd ever made. I placed the envelope in front of him, my fingers shaking slightly. "Here," I said. "It's the car title. Dad forged my name." He put on his glasses, studied the document, then exhaled through his nose. A long, weary sigh. "He always thought he was clever," he muttered. But this time, he crossed the line. We called his attorney, a woman named Susan, who'd handled the family estate for decades. Within an hour, she was sitting in that same dining room, her pen tapping against the folder. "This is serious," she said. "Forgery is a felony, Walter. Do you want to press charges?" I hesitated, but Grandpa didn't. If that's what it takes to make it right. His voice carried no anger, just finality. That afternoon, Grandpa made another call, to my parents. "Family meeting, tonight, 7 sharp." His tone left no room for argument. I waited outside when they arrived. The moment I saw their car in the driveway, my pulse quickened. Emily stepped out first, looking pale, almost anxious. My mother's lips were pressed thin. My father looked furious already. As they walked toward the porch, Grandpa opened the door before they could knock. "Inside," he ordered. "Now." They had no idea that by the end of the night, their lies, their favoritism, and their sense of control would all come crashing down. The air in the living room was thick with tension. Grandpa sat at the head of the table, posture straight, his hands folded on the folder between us. I stood beside him, silent but unshaken. My parents and Emily took their seats slowly, unsure of what was coming, but sensing it wasn't good. Dad tried to lighten the mood. "Dad, what's all this about? We already talked about the car. It's done." Grandpa cut him off. "No, Gregory, it's not done. It's far from done." His tone was low, calm, but it carried the weight of authority, the kind that made even my father shrink back in his chair. He opened the folder and laid the document on the table. This is the car title, he said. Rachel's name, her signature. Except it's not hers, is it? Mom's face blanched. Emily's eyes widened. Dad's jaw locked tight. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice cracked. Grandpa stood slowly, palms flat on the table. Don't insult my intelligence. You forged your daughter's name and stole from her, and from me. You lied to my face. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock, loud and cruel. Emily whispered, Dad, tell me it's not true. Dad's silence told her everything. Grandpa reached into the folder again, pulling out another set of papers. This is a police report. Forgery, theft, misappropriation of assets. I haven't submitted it yet, but I will, unless you fix this tonight. Mom's voice trembled. Walter, please, let's handle this privately. Privately? Grandpa snapped. You already made it private when you chose who mattered and who didn't. That ends tonight. He turned to me then. Rachel, go get the spare keys. We're getting your car back. The look on my father's face as I walked past him wasn't just guilt. It was fear. We drove together, Grandpa, me, and his lawyer, to my parents' house. The evening sun was fading, casting long shadows that made the driveway feel colder than usual. Emily trailed behind us, silent, her face pale. My mother stood on the porch, shaking her head. This isn't necessary, she pleaded. It's just a misunderstanding. Grandpa ignored her and motioned toward the car parked neatly in the driveway. That, he said, pointing at the silver Toyota, belongs to Rachel. Dad came out next, red-faced, defensive. She's been driving it for years, Dad. It's too late to— Too late? Grandpa's voice thundered. It's never too late to make something right. I could feel my heart racing as I stepped closer to the car. You forged my name, Dad. You took what was mine and gave it to her. He opened his mouth to protest, but Grandpa's lawyer cut in. Mr. Miller, if you continue to withhold this vehicle, it will constitute criminal possession of stolen property. I strongly suggest you comply. For a moment, everything stood still. Then, with a trembling hand, Dad reached into his pocket, pulled out the keys, and held them out to me. Fine, he said. Take it, if that's what you want. It's not about the car, I replied. It's about honesty, about what you taught us. Grandpa nodded approvingly. And what they failed to live by, he said, glancing at my parents. From this moment, everything changes. He turned to his lawyer. Draw up an amendment to my will. Gregory and Elaine are to be removed as beneficiaries. Their share goes to Rachel. Mom gasped, clutching her chest. Dad, please! But Grandpa was resolute. You betrayed my trust. You won't get the chance to do it again. That night, the truth was no longer buried, and for the first time, justice felt real. Cold, clean, and long overdue. The silence after Grandpa's declaration was deafening. My mother's lips trembled, her eyes wet with disbelief. Dad stared at the ground, his hands trembling on the table. Emily stood a few feet away, her arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Dad, she whispered, why would you do that? Why would you take it from her? He didn't answer. His mouth opened, but no words came, only the sound of his own guilt filling the room. Mom finally spoke, her voice thin and cracking. Rachel, we thought you'd understand. You've always been stronger, more independent. Emily, she's fragile. Fragile? I laughed bitterly. She's spoiled, not fragile, and you made her that way. Grandpa's gaze hardened. You both used strength as an excuse to neglect one child while coddling the other. That's not parenting. It's cruelty dressed up as fairness. Mom broke down then, tears streaming. We didn't mean to hurt you. Yes, you did. I said softly. Every time you called me strong, you meant I didn't matter. Emily turned to me, tears in her own eyes. Rachel, I'm sorry. I knew. I saw you walking to work, but I didn't say anything. I was afraid if I gave the car back, they'd stop loving me. Her words hit me harder than any insult could. For a moment, I saw the scared child behind the entitled smile. It's not too late to do the right thing, I told her. She nodded, handing me the car's spare keychain. I hope this means something. Grandpa looked at us both, pride and sorrow mixing in his eyes. Tonight, a family broke. But maybe, someday, it can rebuild on truth. I turned toward the door, clutching the keys, ready to leave behind everything false and walk into something finally real. The next morning, the sun rose clear for the first time in weeks. I stood by the Toyota, my Toyota, running my hand along the hood. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was a symbol of everything I'd fought for, everything that had been taken and finally reclaimed. Grandpa came out onto the porch, his cane tapping softly against the wood. You're leaving early, he said. I nodded. I need to start over, somewhere away from all this. He smiled, tired but proud. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. I added something to that folder last night. He handed me an envelope, thick with papers. Inside was the new title, officially under my name, and a bank statement that made me gasp. Grandpa, this is too much. It's justice, he said firmly, and a start. You've earned both. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't hide them this time. I hugged him tight. Thank you for believing in me when they didn't. He squeezed my hand. You don't owe me thanks, Rachel. Just promise me one thing. Never let someone convince you that being strong means being silent. I drove away as the morning light broke across the sky, the engine humming softly beneath me. Every mile felt lighter, freer. When I stopped at the first red light, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the girl who had walked in the rain for years, finally driving her own path. Sometimes revenge isn't about payback. It's about reclaiming your dignity, your name, your worth. This was my revenge story, my true story, and my family revenge story. And if you've ever been the forgotten one, I hope my journey reminds you. Silence may protect others, but truth will always set you free. If you enjoyed this family story inspired by real-life events and Reddit stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories like this one. He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my throat dry. Dad finally looked up, his face pale. Kayla, that's enough, he muttered, forcing a smile toward Grandpa. She's just being dramatic. Dramatic? I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. I pay cash rent to a woman who smokes so much her walls are yellow. I sleep next to a water heater. You call that dramatic? Mom's eyes darted between us, her lipstick trembling. Richard, what is she talking about? Dad leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. Dad, you must have misunderstood. I never received any money. But Grandpa's confusion turned to disbelief. I wired $70,000 to you, he said, his voice now firm. You told me you surprised her with the place. You even sent me photos. All color drained from Dad's face. Megan's mouth opened, then closed again. For a long moment, no one spoke. My heart pounded like it was trying to leave my chest. Grandpa's hand pressed flat on the table. Is that true? I looked straight at Dad. Tell him. He didn't. And that's when something inside me cracked, something that had stayed silent for too long. To understand that moment, you'd have to know my family. We were the kind that smiled for holiday photos and spoke in half-truths. Grandpa Walter was the pillar, an old-school man who believed in hard work, Sunday dinners, and quiet generosity. My mother, Elise, was gentle but timid, always smoothing tension instead of confronting it. My sister Megan was the golden one, charmed, admired, untouchable. And then there was Dad, Richard Whitman, the kind of man who measured worth in money and appearances. Growing up, I always sensed a hierarchy I wasn't part of. Megan got praise, I got lessons about humility. When Grandpa sent birthday checks, mine mysteriously turned into family savings. When he gifted Megan a used car for college, Dad said I should learn responsibility and take the bus. I never questioned it out loud. I just assumed maybe I hadn't earned it. That's the quiet poison of favoritism. It makes you believe you deserve less. But now, staring at Dad's tight jaw and clenched fists, the pattern unraveled like a bad seam. This wasn't misunderstanding. It was a system built on deceit. Mom's voice broke the silence. "Richard, please tell me you didn't." He stood abruptly, muttering something about stepping outside for air. Grandpa's gaze followed him, wounded and disbelieving. I couldn't meet his eyes. I felt small and exposed, like every year of quiet endurance had been leading here. That brunch wasn't just awkward. It was the funeral for every lie my family had lived on. After that brunch, I couldn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly through the city until the streets blurred, then parked outside my basement apartment, if you could even call it that. The air smelled of cigarettes and damp concrete. A single bulb flickered above the door, buzzing like it resented being alive. Inside, the air was cold and still. The ceiling pipes groaned every few minutes like tired lungs. My bed sat next to the boiler. The hum of machinery was the lullaby I'd gotten used to. I'd lived like this for 4 years. 4 years of pretending it was fine, that it was temporary, that I didn't mind living underground while my father talked about building character. I sat on the edge of the bed, remembering every job I'd taken to survive. Cleaning houses, waiting tables, designing cheap logos for clients who never paid on time. I thought of every time Dad had told me, "You chose your path, Kayla. Life doesn't hand out gifts." But now I knew he'd pocketed the one gift meant to give me a start. Tears came, hot and fast. Not because I'd lost money, but because I'd lost time, pride, and trust. I realized I'd spent years shrinking myself to fit into a family that only valued silence. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, counting the cracks like a map of everything I'd broken trying to belong. The next morning, I woke to a knock at my door, a sound so out of place it startled me. When I opened it, Grandpa was standing there, holding 2 coffees. His suit jacket was wrinkled, his eyes tired but fierce. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. I stepped aside. For a long moment, he just looked around the cramped space. The sagging couch, the yellowed walls, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. "This is where you've been living?" he murmured. I nodded, embarrassed. "I didn't want pity," I said quietly. He set the coffee down and turned to me. "You shouldn't need pity, Kayla. You should have had support." His voice broke slightly on the last word. He asked for the full story, how long I'd been here, what jobs I'd taken, every detail. I told him everything. By the end, his hands were trembling. "Your father lied to me," he said, more to himself than to me. "He stole from both of us." When he looked up again, his eyes were steel. "We're going to the bank tomorrow. I want every transfer traced." "Grandpa, you don't have to." "I do," he interrupted. "Because this isn't just about money. It's about what kind of people we choose to be when truth comes knocking." He left soon after, but before he went, he placed his hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone in this anymore," he said. For the first time in years, I believed him. The next day, Grandpa picked me up before sunrise. He drove in silence, the kind that isn't empty but heavy with purpose. The city was still half asleep as we pulled into the brick building downtown, the bank where he'd done business for 30 years. Inside, the banker, a stern woman in her 50s, greeted him respectfully. "Mr. Whitman, it's been a while." He nodded curtly. "Let's see the transfer records from 4 years ago. $70,000 meant for my granddaughter, Kayla." She hesitated, then clicked through her computer. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. "Here it is," she said finally. "Funds sent from your account to Richard Whitman, your son, marked as a gift for Kayla's condo." My chest tightened. Grandpa's jaw worked silently. "And where did it go after that?" he asked. She clicked again. 5 days later, the amount was transferred into an investment account under Richard Whitman's name. Grandpa's voice turned cold. "Print everything." As we left, he called his lawyer from the car, his tone sharp, commanding. Nothing like the warm man I'd grown up with. "File the paperwork," he said, "and draft a letter revoking Richard's financial power of attorney immediately." He hung up and glanced at me. "This isn't just betrayal, Kayla. It's theft, and I intend to make it right." I stared out the window as the sun broke through the morning fog, lighting the skyline. For the first time, justice didn't feel like revenge. It felt like breath. That afternoon, Grandpa parked in front of the house I hadn't entered in 4 years. It looked the same. White porch, trimmed hedges, a front door that still squeaked. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't coming as a daughter. I was coming as the truth. Dad opened the door, eyes narrowing the moment he saw Grandpa behind me. "What's going on?" he asked, forcing a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We need to talk," Grandpa said flatly. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and lies. Mom appeared from the kitchen, her hands already shaking. Megan hovered on the stairs, sensing a storm. Grandpa didn't sit. He placed a manila folder on the coffee table and spoke calmly, each word like a nail hammered into silence. "You told me Kayla was living in the apartment I bought her. You sent me photos. But the bank records prove you transferred the entire $70,000 into your own account." Dad scoffed. "You can't prove intent. I was holding it for her future." "For her future?" I said, my voice steady for once. "While I lived in a basement next to a boiler?" He turned to me. "You needed to learn independence, Kayla. I wasn't going to hand you a free life." Grandpa's voice thundered, not loud, but commanding. "You didn't teach her independence, Richard. You taught her betrayal." The room went dead silent. For the first time, Dad's confidence cracked. And in that silence, I found my voice. The next Sunday, the family gathered again at the same restaurant, same table, same sunlight spilling through the windows. But nothing felt the same. Grandpa sat at the head this time, a thick envelope resting in front of him. I sat beside him. Dad and Mom arrived late, looking as if they'd aged years in a week. When the chatter began to die down, Grandpa rose slowly, clearing his throat. "Before we eat, there's something I need to say." His voice carried across the room, calm but cutting. 4 years ago, I sent money to help Kayla begin her life. I was told she received it and was thriving. He paused, eyes hardening. That was a lie. The air snapped tight. Mom's lip trembled. Dad shifted in his seat. "Dad, we don't need to sit down," Grandpa said, the authority in his tone absolute. He opened the envelope and slid a paper across the table toward Dad. "Read it." Dad stared at it, then at me. His hand shook. "You're humiliating me." Grandpa didn't blink. "No. You humiliated yourself when you stole from your daughter and called it love." Finally, Dad began to read, his voice breaking. It was a written confession, an admission that he'd taken the $70,000, lied about it, and would repay it in full. Every word fell like a stone. When he finished, no one clapped, no one breathed. Grandpa said quietly, "No more pretending." I met Dad's eyes and whispered, "You taught me one thing, though. How to stand up when the truth finally shows up." The room erupted after that, murmurs, gasps, the scrape of chairs. My aunt covered her mouth. My cousin stared like she'd just witnessed a crime. Mom tried to hold Dad's arm, but he pulled away, his pride unraveling right there under the soft clink of silverware. Grandpa stayed standing, unflinching. "This family was built on trust," he said, "and today, that foundation cracked. But maybe it's not too late to rebuild, just not with lies." Dad looked small, almost childlike, his shoulders slumped. "I thought I was doing what was best," he muttered, eyes down. "For who?" I asked. "For me? Or for the version of yourself you were trying to protect?" He didn't answer. Maybe he couldn't. Megan's voice cut through the tension. "Kayla, I didn't know." Tears glistened on her lashes. "If I did, I swear I would have said something." I believed her. Maybe that was growth or exhaustion. Mom's hands trembled as she whispered, "I failed both of you." Grandpa placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then help fix it." The check came, though no one had eaten. When we finally stepped outside, the sun felt almost violent after so much darkness. Dad lingered behind, watching us leave. For a second, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he just whispered, "You'll understand someday." But I already did. I understood that silence is its own kind of thief, and I was done feeding it. It's been a year since that day. I live in a small but beautiful apartment downtown, real windows, sunlight that floods the room in the morning. Every creak in the floor reminds me that this place is mine, earned not by inheritance, but by survival. Grandpa visits every Sunday. He always brings fresh flowers and insists on making coffee even though he burns every pot. Sometimes we talk about the past. Sometimes we just sit in quiet gratitude. His health isn't what it used to be, but his spirit, his fierce honesty, keeps both of us alive in ways money never could. Dad repaid the money, just as he promised. But the distance between us remains, wide and unbridgeable. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. I don't hate him anymore. I just stopped expecting him to be the father he never was. I've built something new from the wreckage. I started a small design studio, nothing grand, but enough to give me purpose. Each time I sign my name on a project, I think about how close I came to losing myself to silence. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Love without truth is poison, and silence protects the wrong people. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Stand up, even if it's at your own family's table. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't payback, it's peace.